So you want to make art or an animation and yet find yourself staring at a blank canvas or the default cube. In your mind is some vague image of a cool character design, so you jump right in and instead end up with, nope, that didn't go to plan. You realise once again that you just can't draw, get dejected and give up once more. Or, rather than making the same old mistakes, it's time to figure out what you, or in this case what I, can do. Let's see how. I've always had an interest in character animation, based on my own characters. This has generally resulted in me diving in headfirst to create the 3D model, learning about the software, etc., not at all being happy with the result, and starting all over again. If you think that very little ever got animated, you'd be right, and then other things would happen and nothing at all was done for ages. Then, on discovering Blender and somewhat learning it, yes, I made a donut, more than once, my interest was rekindled. But this time, I wasn't going to make the mistake of the past. Rather than jumping directly into Blender and starting modelling, I tried a radical new plan, concept art. So with stylus in hand, I made some basic head sketches, and then, forgetting that I really can't draw, repeated the mistake in 2D that I tried to avoid in 3D. There's so much wrong with that image, from bad perspective to just trying to create so much at once, from a basic idea in my head. I needed a new plan. Well, to be fair, I actually needed an initial plan, and the first step, and this bit is important, I actually wrote down a very basic character description. This would partly change and be greatly expanded upon, and still is, as a complete story is being developed, but it was enough to get started. Next was to break down the individual parts of the description, starting with the pose. The internet is a fantastic resource. You can find basically anything, including dual sword poses. From that, quick thumbnails were made and narrowed down to an initial choice. Then, using basic construction shapes, a pose is refined at normal proportions before being adjusted to a little more of a stylized shape. Then, once again, partly repeating mistakes, old habits are hard to break, I tried to do a full design with colour based on the pose. It was at least more successful than the earlier attempt, but I wasn't totally happy with the pose and so tried a variation. Thinking this was okay for now, it seemed time to consider the face, but given initial attempts, this was clearly going to be a problem. My solution was to focus on what I can do and approach it all as a more methodical design challenge, starting with the eyes looking dead front on. With a look I was happy with, a basic head shape or guide was established, then it was basically a case of piecing the bits together. With the eyes in place, some general nose shapes were drawn up and one placed. Then a few mouth designs are considered and one selected, followed by a basic face outline and finally ears are attached. A rough sketch for how the hair could look was then cleaned up and a general grey tone was added. Rather than trying to do too much at once and add colour from the start, basic grey shades are used just to give an idea of how light or dark the area should be. If you're thinking this is almost designed by Identikit, then you'd be right, but I was fairly happy with the initial result and it gave me a good starting point for further iteration. As such, it was then a matter of scaling shapes, trying different noses and mouths, along with some alterations to the shape of the eyes and a somewhat new hairstyle. After a couple more iterations, I considered the basic character description once more, and that she was a taller girl. To my mind, that should mean a bit of a thinner, longer face, and I felt the current one was too round. I also wanted the hair to be darker, at which point much the same process was then repeated to come up with the side profile designs. At this point, I was okay with calling the design final. That's not to say there won't be any more changes, but I was happy enough with the overall look that it was time to move on and see how it works with a full pose design. But for now, I think we'll leave it there for this first production diary. If you like this look behind the scenes and want to see more, or have specific questions or requests, then please click the usual YouTube buttons and or leave a comment below. If not, that's perfectly fine, and I hope to see you for the next one. Cheers.